Today we're going to be out in Olive Grove and I'm going to show you how to prune olive trees. First things first, tools. What you're going to want is a good pair of secateurs, nice and sharp and oiled so they move smoothly and cut very cleanly. A good pruning saw. I've got a Silky Fox Pocket Boy for doing this. Cuts very well through good sized branches. And a pair of loppers. I've got a pair of steel loppers and these cut through branches like butter. So let's get out in the orchard and get to it. This is the tree we're going to be pruning today. The first thing you want to do before you prune any tree is ask, why am I pruning this tree? In this case, the reason we're pruning it is because it's become very congested in the centre, and that's going to shade out the fruit, which in this case we want fruit because these trees are for olive oil. So our intention here is to open up the tree, allowing light to all of the branches to ripen our fruit, but also to support the structure of the tree so that it's easier to harvest. Because olives are very small, they're very time consuming to harvest, we want a tree that supports us for an efficient harvest. With this tree we can see that the centre has become very congested where it hasn't been pruned for a few years. When we're pruning an olive tree, we want to think about what structure are we going for. It's most common with olive trees to prune them to be an open vase-like structure where you have around 5 secondary stems coming out from the main trunk and branching out laterally, much like a vase. And the reason this is the most common is because it makes it very easy to harvest the fruit, and when we have this open centre of the tree, it means that we can maximise the amount of light reaching the branches. If we look at this tree, we can see that the centre has become very congested over the years where it hasn't been pruned. And so giving this a good prune now will open up the centre, allowing light to all of the branches to ripen our fruit for olive oil production. Look how congested the centre of this tree is. There's loads of branches all growing inward into the tree, or we also have a lot of these water shoots in the centre of the tree that are just growing straight up rapidly to get the light. If we allow these to carry on growing, the tree will have all of these vertical branches going high up into the air, and this is going to make it very difficult to harvest the fruit because all the fruit will be up there on these thin, fimbly branches. And 2, this becomes very congested in the centre, meaning that the light isn't going to reach all the olives. So one of the first things we want to do is start opening up the centre of this tree, removing these water shoots, removing any of these vertical branches, and favouring the branches that go out horizontally. You can see here with this tree we have a very good scaffold structure of these horizontal branches, and so we want to remove all of the congested growth in the centre. This tree has clearly had very thoughtful pruning done over the years, it just hasn't been pruned for a little while. If you've got a very young tree that hasn't already been shaped, it's going to be a bit different, but most older trees, it's very likely that they would have been pruned in this fashion. So all you need to do is restructure that growth. When we do prune, we want to cut right back to the base of a branch. There's two types of cuts when we're pruning. There's a heading cut, where you're cutting further up a stem, like that. And there's a thinning cut, where you're cutting right back to the base. Most of the time, we want to do thinning cuts, where you're cutting right back to the base, because heading cuts encourage a lot of new growth, whereas thinning cuts don't encourage as much growth. I'm going to take the saw to some of these so I can get really close back to that stem. When we're cutting, we really want to get close to the stem. For me, pruning is a very meditative process where I can get completely immersed into my craft, and so many of those everyday thoughts and worries fall away, and I'm just in a flow state of pruning. Me and the tree slowly chipping away, shaping how the tree is going to grow into the future, and largely doing it intuitively. Yes, there's guiding principles, but each tree is an individual and a living being. And so how you treat that tree is always a bit different, for me anyway. One of the main things I see inexperienced pruners do is prune a tree so that they come to the finished structure without thinking about how is this tree going to grow. And that's the key, is when you're pruning, is thinking about how's this tree going to grow after my pruning. And one of the keys to that is to do these thinning cuts, where you're cutting right back to a main stem and not cutting up at the end of a stem and leaving that growth to be able to shoot out and really encourage erratic growth. We also want to look out for the 3Ds: dead, diseased and damaged growth, and remove these. Are there any branches that have been snapped in the wind and have left a big open wound? We want to remove these. Are there damaged branches from where two branches are overlapping and they're rubbing each other, creating a permanent open wound? We want to remove these. But there's also a certain aspect of allowing some dead growth for wildlife, because when we have dead growth in a tree, in the canopy of a tree, that feeds insects and beetles, which then feeds birds up in the tree, out the way of predation. And dead wood is an extremely valuable habitat for so many different species, and so that's why it's a balancing act. Yes, removing some dead, diseased and damaged growth, but also leaving some with that understanding that this is important for wildlife. Removing all of these vertical water shoots on this stem. For me, I think that the relationship between people and plants and pruning is a beautiful relationship that has been going on for, well, hundreds if not thousands of years. And in this relationship, humans prune a tree for their benefit, in that they're pruning it to encourage fruiting and to help in the harvest. And the tree benefits in that the tree is multiplied and reproduced by people. We favour their growth, and a well pruned tree can live for longer than a tree not pruned. And this is evident from our long-standing relationship with coppicing or pollarding, where when you cut a tree back to the ground, certain types of deciduous trees like hazel, the tree gets a new lease of life. It's renewed, and we don't know how long a tree can live for when it's coppiced on this cycle, because it becomes juvenile again, and for all we know they can carry on indefinitely. So that's where I feel like this relationship between people and plants, where we're in a mutually beneficial relationship, where we prune the tree for our benefit of fruit or fuel or a specific shape that benefits us, and the tree favours through reproduction and extended lifespans. So yeah, it's just this beautiful relationship between people and plants. If there are any stems growing out from the base of the tree like these ones, we want to remove these, because we're really encouraging here one dominant singular stem. And if you allow those to grow, it's going to become very clustered at the base here, and that's not really what we want in this case. I'm Sid, by the way. I've been working with plants my whole life. Grew up on a permaculture small holding in Portugal, where instead of going to school, I spent my time on the family farm, growing our own food ecologically. Spent a lot of time pruning and harvesting olives and taking them to be pressed for olive oil. And yeah, so from a young age I've had this relationship with olives and fruit trees, and really pruning is one of my favourite gardening jobs. Just love being out with the trees, pruning them and thinking about how this is going to change their growth. And then I did my degree at the Eden Project, where I really focused on ethnobotany, and particularly interested in indigenous land practice and edible ecological landscapes. And that's still what I do today. For the last 17 years I've been practicing permaculture and supporting my clients on how to live more sustainably on the land. I love these silky saws. They really do cut through wood like butter. Olive trees respond extremely well from pruning, and this relationship between olive trees and people and how we prune them has been going on for a very long time. Olive tree pruning can be quite mysterious and mystical because every culture has their own ways of doing it and can be quite specific about how that's done. But really, it's not so complicated. You look at creating a structure in the tree that supports olive growth. You favour getting light to all of the olives as they're developing, and you create a structure that is supporting harvest, because as I said before, olive harvest, it can be a long process. So having a tree that you can get up into and you can reach all the branches, it just makes sense. When we're pruning olive trees, we're not going to cut up the stems like this. This is called a heading cut, and that encourages a lot of erratic growth, because if we think of it a bit like a river, there's energy going up this stem, and if this has nowhere to go, that ruptures out and encourages a lot of erratic growth, which then puts energy into growing new wood rather than fruit. So we're almost always going to do what's called a thinning cut, where we cut right back down to the main stem, and that means that the energy carries on flowing out here rather than bursting out. But we do want to come back to these cuts in the summer and do a summer cut where we're controlling any new growth, because every cut we make will encourage new growth. But as we get our trees under control and we get our regular pruning pattern, that new growth is reduced over time and the tree focuses on fruit production, or in this case olives, and puts that energy into beautiful olive oil. You can see now the centre of this tree is starting to open up. You really do want sharp, well-maintained tools so that you can do clean cuts. Always pays off to have good quality, well-maintained tools, so that it just makes our job easier and puts less pressure on your body, which reduces any fatigue and injuries. You can see now how the centre of this tree is starting to open up. We're starting to get a lot more light in the centre. With olive trees, you need as much light as possible to be able to reach olives. Olives have evolved in high light and arid conditions, and so you really do need to open them up so the light can reach all of the olives as they're developing through the season, and that's how we can get the best crops we can. When we're pruning, we do want to try to minimise the amount of cuts we take. So you always want to be looking at taking larger stems rather than loads of small stems, because every cut we make encourages some new growth, and we don't really want to be encouraging new growth on trees. But saying that, it does pay off to prune your trees into a shape that favours fruit production and ease of harvest. You can see on this stem there's a lot of these vertical water shoots. So I'm going to take all of these out, but I'm going to take them flush along the stem. As I said before, I'm going to do thinning cuts rather than heading cuts, which a thinning cut is at the base and a heading cut is further up the stem and encourages new growth, which is okay on young trees where you're trying to encourage growth in a certain direction or to encourage branching, but on this tree that's not what we want. It's good practice to leave the pile of your cuttings right beside the tree so you can refer back to it, and in one season don't remove more than 1/3 of the tree. That's a good rule of thumb. Yes, olive trees do respond very well to pruning, but it's better not to cause them too much stress by taking off too much growth in 1 year. That's this tree done for this year, and I've opened up the centre, I've removed a lot of that clustered growth, and I've left quite a lot of growth on the outside of the stems, and that's because I don't want to take off too much in 1 year, and I want to leave some growth for fruiting this coming year. A recap on what we've done here. We've looked at the tree and we've said, why are we pruning? In this case, we're pruning to adapt the structure of the tree to favour fruit production, or in this case olive production, and harvest. And then we've gone through the tree and we've removed much of the dead, diseased and damaged growth. We've removed the vertical water shoots and opened up the centre of the tree. We've only done thinning cuts where we've cut right back to the base of a stem to allow that energy to carry on flowing. We've removed the stems or the new growth around the base of the trunk, and we've decongested the centre of the tree, leaving and encouraging that horizontal growth outward from the stem. And in this case, we've created a open vase-like structure where you have these clear scaffold horizontal stems going outward from the tree, and these then encourage that light to hit all of the branches, favouring fruit production. This is what it looks like on a much younger tree. You can see where I've removed these vertical stems, encouraging that lateral growth, and for the growth to be further out on these horizontal branches so that you have an open centre and the light can reach all of the branches to ripen our olives, and this creates a structure that supports harvest so that you can reach all of these branches at a good height, and it makes it an efficient harvest. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, give it a like and a subscribe, and you'll hear more from me on horticultural tips and ecological gardening. Have a lovely day.